Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again, covering a band we have not talked about in long form on the podcast to date, Katatonia, and their Dead End Kings album from 2012, and their follow-up release, Dethroned and Uncrowned, the acoustic version of the same album which came out 1 year later, a kind of a nice companion piece to this Katatonia album. But before we talk all things Katatonia, A, how are you, my friend? And B, you survived the week, so that's good on the heels of Creator.
Yeah, the Katatonia was like a walk down a flowery path after Creator, maybe a sad flowery path, but it was
a flowery path, no less.
Yeah, it was definitely an easier listen, to be sure, and it also helped that I was at least somewhat familiar with the sound that I was expecting. With Creator, I had no clue what I was in for, so this was a little more predictable. We'll see if next week I keep the K streak going after Creator and Katatonia. Camelot, maybe, or maybe we don't want to
go back to
three
King's
episodes
X,
in a row
perhaps?
Yeah, but maybe we don't want to do 3 episodes in a row with a K starting.
That's also quite fair. I think that's a good point. I'll tell you this: when I wasn't listening to Katatonia, I had a couple of different things that kind of caught my ear this week. It's funny. I actually wound up listening to the Katatonia stuff a lot more than I expected. Not because I didn't know it, but because I was just really enjoying it. And I even though I was familiar with it, I just wanted to give both albums its due listen. But there were a couple of things that kind of caught my ear this week. I'll start with a band that has put out a new album, which I think is going to be on a lot of people's radar, and that's Rivers of Nihil. This is a band that I've always liked. I like some of the older material better, but their new self-titled album is really good. It's dense, but it's really enjoyable, and I have a strong suspicion it's going to be on a lot of people's year-ends lists. I know it was something you were curious about. I don't know if you've heard it just yet, but have you heard any of their back catalog or anything like that? I know a lot of people have been talking about this one.
Have you said who it is yet?
Oh, I said Rivers of Nihil. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
If you did, I missed it completely. But I'm more aware of them because our friend Justin sends us random clips from them. I think that he's kind of in the new stuff camp with them. So because of that, I've enjoyed the couple of singles that have come out ahead of this album. So I'm going to listen to it. I want to say this is probably going to be the first time this is going to be the first time I listen to one of their albums start to finish. I have a couple of tracks from them in my library that either because you put it on a playlist, and then I think a few years back, Glenn had them on his top 50 list, so I think I gave one of the tracks a listen. So far, I've listened to House of Light and American Death from the new album, which I believe is self-titled, and I'm going to listen to the rest, though. I have this backlog of more extreme metal albums that I've been kind of holding back on listening to for the right mood to strike. I think who else is on that list? I have Allegion, Cradle of Filth, Arch Enemy, all those. So that's probably going to go in the pile with them, and we'll see.
You got to sprinkle those into kind of other things, because if you listen to them all back to back, I don't know that it's going to go so well.
Yeah, sometimes I prefer that if I'm in the right kind of mood for it. It's easier for me to just get it all out in one shot, because if I listen to this in the wrong state of mind, I'll probably just end up not enjoying it. Kind of the way I felt the first time I listened to the Creator album last week. I was like, oh, I'm not in the right mindset for this at all. So obviously, it was it improved as the week went on, but this is definitely on my radar. I know a lot of people are excited about it, and the people that have already listened to it have a lot of good things to say. So I'm glad you reminded me. I am adding it to my library as we speak, and I will put it in my playlist. I actually had a little bit of an iTunes snafu yesterday which you know better than anybody is enough to make your heart stop. But my library file got corrupted.
Oof.
I don't know if it's because my computer restarted. I don't know. Do you still use iTunes?
I do. I'm one of the few. I have been dabbling, and I mentioned this a few weeks ago. I've been dabbling in some of the higher end audio streaming services, kind of using the free trials, trying to figure out which one I kind of want to subscribe to. But I use iTunes in the house. I use Plex typically on the road because I have all my stuff backed up on a server. And then I've been dabbling with the newer, high res streaming services, which is actually really nice. I have to say they do a good job with some of that stuff. But for now, everything's still cataloged in iTunes, and that's kind of my central hub for everything.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I just, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But one of the things I find interesting about iTunes is that, like, it doesn't, I don't know about you, but mine doesn't close. I'll X out of it and it just reopens again. And so the problem with that is that if you have a sudden restart of your computer or whatever and your library is open, there is a chance that you could corrupt your library. And I think that's what ended up happening. Thankfully, I have a software program called SyncToy that every morning does a sync of my music files and pretty much documents, things like that to a backup drive. And so I was able to backtrack my library about a week, but I had to kind of piece together all the stuff that I added in the last week and try to remember it all and find it and put it back together. And as annoying as it was, I kept reminding myself, well, if I had to do the entire library, that would be a hell of a lot worse than this. So,
and I did that about 10 years ago when I lost all of my music, and I still have the chills from that. In fact, the mere fact that you're bringing this up, I'm going to go back everything up again the second that I get off this thing, because I'm starting to get the shakes just from that experience.
Yep. It's if nothing else, I'm here to give you PTSD.
And you've done a great job.
When I was in college, even as far back as this would have been 01 or 02, I used to have 2 hard drives on my computer, and I would keep all my music on the D drive. And the C drive had, I would keep a Winamp playlist file on my desktop that had my entire library. And this was before I had switched over to iTunes. And my D drive crashed. And the only thing that saved me was that my playlist file was still on the desktop, which was on the C drive. So I had the list of every single song that I had lost. So at the time, I think there was a downloading service called Audio Galaxy. And I went and I re-downloaded every single track that I had. It took forever, but thankfully this was in the time of, college, high-speed campus internet or whatever. And so it took me probably a few weeks, but I eventually recreated the entire thing. And I never, went without a backed up music library ever again after that. And that was over 20 years ago. Lesson learned.
I'm thinking about putting all this stuff in a cloud somewhere. This way I just know that it's there for peace of mind. But we'll get to that. I wanted to mention one other album, which I think of particular interest to you potentially. We actually got a promo for this. It's a band I had never heard of out of Canada. They're called Lycanthro. And they came out with a new album about a week or so ago called Remnants of Rapture. This sounds a lot more aggressive, I guess, than it is. It's actually, I would consider them just a straight up metal band. They consider themselves a power metal band, but either way, it was pretty good. And it was the kind of stuff that you just kind of put it on in the background and you just kind of enjoy the hard rock or metal for what it is. I think that this is their second release. Their first full album came out about 4 years ago. It was called Mark of the Wolf. I'm going to go back and listen to that. But this is something I think you'll definitely enjoy, just knowing your tastes.
I am friends with their singer on Facebook, actually. James, I met him at the Vortex at Prague Power one year, sitting at a table of mutual friends, and he's a super nice guy. I have one track of theirs, which was from one of their first EP. It was on the Prague Power Sampler in 2018. So I don't know that I've heard much from them since then. So I will give this new album a listen for sure. But yeah, I've always been aware of them because I see a lot of the posts on social media, but I just never got a chance to give them a listen. Are they playing at Mad with Power this year?
I'm not sure. Wouldn't shock me just because, they're not coming from that far away, but I don't know if they're playing. But that would be cool. This is a band that I would definitely like to see. And, who knows? That would be fun.
You know what? It's Luthero. I always get Luthero and like Anthro.
Oh, yeah. No, they're two different bands, in fairness.
Okay, got it.
Anything catch your ear this week?
Honestly, just one single came out that I thought was quite interesting. Gloryhammer has a new single called On a Quest for Aberdeen. I'm still I still can't get used to the new vocalist. I loved, what's his name? Henry Winkler from the Fonz. His vocals were so good. Or not that they were good, they were just very distinct. And so I just really enjoyed his style with the band. So as much as I like, Sozos Michael as a vocalist, I'm just not used to him as Gloryhammer's vocalist. So I'll give, if there's an album that follows, I will definitely give it a listen and see where I land, because man, I remember the second and third Gloryhammers were two of my favorite albums of those years they were released. They were so good. So we'll see. Alstorm's also releasing singles right around the same time too. So we'll see. I thought both bands' last albums were a little disappointing for me. So we'll look forward to seeing if they are more interesting for me on the next albums. But other than that, I have been just kind of sticking to the podcast stuff pretty much. I don't know that I listen to anything that I haven't mentioned. I do have some stuff I want to listen to. The new Holler album, Next in Line. Fandom Elite has an EP called Mantis, and Moonlight Haze has a new album called Beyond. So these are all things, plus the aforementioned heavier stuff. I have some work to do, but all said, and all things considered, by the end of May or early June, I think I'm in decent shape compared to prior years.
Very good. Very good. And obviously this is the first show of the month, so that is obviously a request week for us. This comes from my Patreon member, Patrick Celsus, longtime supporter of the podcast. Thank you, Patrick. And thank you for picking a band that we've just not yet covered. There's still so much stuff that we have not touched, from both bands that we have covered and bands that we've not even gone near. And this is one of those artists, the Swedish death metal turned hard rock turned goth rock turned, I don't know what you call them now, Katatonia. And I say that because they're one of those bands, much like an Anathema or somebody like that, where their sound has just morphed completely over the decades. This particular album, Dead End Kings, came out August 27th of 2012, so almost 13 years ago. It was the band's 9th studio album, and if you compare this to their debut, you might as well be listening to two totally different bands. That's how different this stuff sounds. But this modern Katatonia style is the type of music they've been doing now for several albums and several years and decades, I guess, at this point. Before we get into the details of Dead End Kings and obviously the follow-up effort that we'll intersperse into the discussion, when did this band first come on your radar? Or is this kind of like the first deep dive that you've ever done?
I've listened to full albums of them probably since the Fall of Hearts album in 2016, which would have been a few years after these. I think at that point I was just starting to just listen to the albums as they were released, just because I knew I enjoyed the band, and everybody always would have their albums kind of high on their year-end lists, or at least on their year-end lists. And I don't find anything about their music to be offensive in any way. It's actually quite, for the most part, melancholy and chill. My intro to the band was probably via a playlist that you had made for, I believe, a coworker that was like interested in getting into metal, and you made this this like 4-disc mix of like, I think, one song per band, of like this wide variety from Halloween to, like Katatonia, or just anything that kind of fit the prog rock, prog metal, power metal, like band you'd hear at Prog Power, genre. And the song from Katatonia that you chose was Leaders. And I remember liking that song quite a bit. And then when the band was announced for Prog Power, I kind of did the set list treatment, where I would just listen to whatever their most recent set list is and all the songs from it. And so like I would get smatterings of songs from that. I think from this album, the song that at the time they were playing live quite a bit was Dead Letters. So like that one and Buildings were probably the ones that I had heard the most from this album. But never a band that I was like really a huge fan of. I'm not familiar with their death metal roots. I'm sure that would be an interesting thing to cover. I'm glad we didn't go that way after last week, but this is kind of interesting stuff. And Patrick had kind of asked us to talk about the companion album, Dethroned and Uncrowned, as like that's, for a band that's already kind of melancholy, they take it like a step further by doing like acoustic versions of said melancholy tunes. I'll share Patrick's words that he provided for us on this episode. He said, Katatonia is one of those bands that significantly changed their sound quite a bit over the years, from their early years as a death doom band to their alt-rock stylings in the 2000s to the gothy, doomy prog boys they are today. So not terribly different from what you had just said. Dead End Kings and its softer sibling album, to me, is the pinnacle of my favorite flavor of Katatonia. Can I explain why? No. Besides the fact I'm a sucker for albums that do the same songs in both a heavy and soft way, like Gentle Storm. And with their new album coming out June 6th, I think the timing's perfect for an inaugural Katatonia episode. Admittedly, there is the added bonus of watching the light leave Justin's eyes as he is subjected to Swedish sad boy music. I'll let Nietzsche insert whatever evil laugh he deems appropriate to end the blurb. And
awesome.
To his request,
that made me laugh. That's funny. I'm not sure I disagree. I don't know that it was my favorite album before we got into it this week. There was one or two others in the discography that came out around this time that I loved, but upon reflection, I can totally see why this would be somebody's favorite. It was kind of a time of change for the band. And I say that because two-time long stays, Jonas Rensky and Anders Nystrom, kind of the heart and the soul of the band are here, but it's a lot of other members that were either joining the band or leaving the band around this time. Specifically, Nicholas Sandin, it was the first album that featured him on bass. Per Eriksson, it was the only album to feature him on guitars. And then it was the last album that featured drummer Daniel Likovist, and I am sure I butchered that, so I apologize. But here you've got basically the two core members, and then three members that were either coming in or leaving the band around the same time. So it's kind of an interesting release in that sense, but not entirely different from the albums that came both before it, namely Night is the New Day from 2009, or The Fall of Hearts, which kind of came after this in 2016. But it's the band is firing on all cylinders. And I'll tell you, I have seen the band live twice. I saw them once at Prog Power in 2017, which was a very, very memorable set, not least of which because it was my birthday. But also I saw them back in, and I'm looking at the set list. I can't believe that it's been this long, but I saw them in New York City in 2012 on this tour. So I should just note that I saw them actually play a good smattering of these songs live. But I'll say this. You want to talk about an interesting tour, Katatonia co-headlining with Devin Townsend with Paradise Lost opening. Just a really interesting show. And although there's crossover appeal amongst all of these bands, Paradise Lost obviously on the heavier side, Devin on the quirkier prog side, it's the kind of thing where if you like one of these bands, I could totally see why you like all the bands, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's I feel like that's kind of like a no-brainer touring package for, I don't know if sad boys, as Patrick put it, would be the right terminology for the fan base, but
by the end of the show, everybody in that room was just crying, and then everyone just walked out. It was
or confused, depending on if Devin finished or
Devin finished this. So Devin came on last. So after Katatonia, everyone had their Kleenexes in their hands, and then Devin came on, and everyone was just kind of scratching their head, like, "What is happening?" Right?
That's kind of like I feel like that's kind of a perfect 1-2 punch, like something a little bit more, melancholy and chill, and then Devin comes out and just like turns the whole show on its head with his quirky and goofy personality. So I feel like that probably worked nicely. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think I saw their set at Prague Power that year. I remember people complaining about the lighting was like shining directly in their, like they had like or was that where there was too much stage smoke? Someone said
there was a lot of smoke.
It
was like, I didn't have a problem with the lights. It was just this is what they do. Like and I think it fits the music very well. They come out on stage, no backdrop, black stage, just a touch of lighting, smoke, and it's like, let's just go and play this stuff. And they did. I think they do a great job. It's really good music live. It's just, I think just like listening to the albums, you got to be in the mood for something like this. This is not something that you're going to gravitate. If you're looking for something upbeat and something that's going to, get your feet rocking and headbanging, not this. But that's okay. I still love music like this, and this album is no different. So that kind of just sets the stage, I think, for what this was. And I should just note, even though it has no bearing on this particular album, as you may recall, I mentioned this a few weeks ago, Anders Nystrom has left the band after being a founding member. So a lot of people, and myself included, are just really curious to hear what this new Katatonia album is going to sound like next week, just because it's the first album really that he's been away from the band. So you're going to get a lot of different influence. It's crazy to me that you can be with the band for almost 35 years and just say, I'm done. When you're a key piece to not only the music, but the songwriting itself.
Have you listened to the singles at all from the new album?
I stayed away from it. I actually wanted to just hear the whole thing. So I couldn't tell you. Maybe I listened to one of them once, but I made a concerted effort to stay away from it. I just want to hear the whole thing. Sometimes I do that. I really can't. I don't really have rhyme or reason for it. Sometimes curiosity gets the best of me, and sometimes I'm just like, I'll take the whole thing and listen to it straight through, and that's my plan for the new one.
It's kind of like when you decide, are you going to listen to or look up a set list beforehand, or if you want to be surprised and kind of go in with without any expectations. So makes sense.
Yeah, there you go. And so I think we should, with that, kind of get into this album. And what I plan to do, and you can, to everyone listening, we'll just do a impromptu production meeting right as we're recording the show. I'm going to kind of intersperse my comments for the acoustic Dethroned and Uncrowned album as we talk about each of these songs, as we always do. I don't have a ton to say, but I do have some thoughts on each of these acoustic songs that kind of accompany this album. And I should note that as far as that album goes, that album came out basically a year after this release, if you will, Dead End Kings. It came out specifically September 9th, 2013. It was a great gift for me on my birthday, and I wasn't expecting it, right? Like here was Dead End Kings, an album that really stood alone, and then they come out with just the exact same recording, but just in different versions of each of the songs. And in retrospect, I think I wish more bands did this. I really enjoyed the contrast, and it was really like getting double bang for your buck, albeit paying for it twice. But it was just cool to hear both albums and different versions of each of these songs. The arrangements are quite different on the acoustic album, although it certainly retains that same melancholy feel.
I think that's really well said. I feel the same way. I thought at first, especially with the first track or two, I felt like it was fairly similar in terms of like, it wasn't like they were taking like an upbeat track and then making like a melancholy version of it. They were taking a melancholy track and making a melancholier version of it. But as it kept going, especially once I started to get to like the Racing Heart and Buildings, I really appreciated the differences, and I really like the acoustic or the melancholier version of Leech, which we'll get to. But yeah, this was cool, and you're right. It would be neat. Like Patrick had mentioned, Gentle Storm, and for those that don't know, that was a collaboration between Anneke van Giersbergen and Arjen Lucanson, where they did a gentle and a storm version of each song, and one album was like the heavier version, and one album was the softer or acoustic version, which I thought was neat. You could kind of like pick and choose what your favorite version of each song is. It's almost like coming out with your own unplugged album, side by side, which is kind of a neat thing. So it is cool that they did this, and you're right, it would be kind of cool to see other bands do it. I feel like Helloween did it to a certain extent with that Unarmed album, where they did kind of like more orchestral and like bombastic, like almost like dramatic, versions of certain songs. Like they took Dr. Steen and turned it into like a jazz tune, and like there were songs that just like they took like Forever in One and really made it even more dramatic than the original. So that's kind of I guess something like that. Like as far as like a power metal band doing something like that, which I think would be cool if more of them did that. But yeah, this was kind of cool, and I'm glad that Patrick asked us to kind of listen to this as a companion piece to the album proper.
Beautiful. And although I'll just say one other thing up front. I had a little bit of trepidation going into this week because I've always found Katatonia songs to be structured in a samey kind of way. I'm not saying they sound completely the same, but the way they've always been structured, it's not like they are so separate and distinct. I thought it was kind of going to blend together. And maybe that's part of the reason I spent so much time with it. But in retrospect, there actually are some differences. And I think I have quite a bit to say about quite a number of these songs because the differences really did shine through when you just listen to it repeatedly. And that's not to say I didn't listen to it a lot when it came out. It just, the album had a feel. I don't know that the songs themselves had an individual feel, but I've kind of done a 180 on that. And I think that is a testament to really just doing a deep dive this week. And no better place to start than the beginning with Departing. And I say that because this was maybe the first or second listen this week. It was going to be my song of the week, and I've gone in a completely different direction. But while the song doesn't have really a true intro, it has this really melodic symphonic start. The keys that you hear in the background are very subtle, but they provide an excellent accent to the song itself. Not surprisingly, very somber verses, even by the band standards, but the chorus is one of the catchier ones on the album, rather heavy, and I thought the contrast on this song is just absolutely fantastic. And then as the song kind of gets chugging along, and I use that term loosely, the string section becomes more and more prominent, which I thought was really nice. And when you listen to the lyrics, they're very introspective. Even has a nice little guitar solo, which is not something you have on every one of these tracks. I thought it was a great start to the album, and it is absolutely one of my favorite tunes on the disc.
Very well said. I like this song. I feel like it does a good job of doing what Katatonia does best, and it's having like really mellow, understated verses followed by really heavy guitar-driven choruses, and it does a good job of kind of bouncing back and forth between those two sounds. And I feel like when it gets heavy, it just has a very full, very like satisfying sound to it. I enjoy it quite a bit. I feel like they've always been, at least in the recent years, a very strong band production wise when it comes to the albums. And I find their vocalist, Jonas Renksy, I find his voice fascinating because there are times that I hear Tommy Yautzen from Amorphous, that like the Cleans. There are times where I hear Tom England from Evergrey, and there are times where I hear Gavin Rossdale from Bush.
That's amazing, and definitely the first time we've mentioned Gavin Rossdale on the podcast.
More than likely,
and maybe the last, but that's okay.
Don't be surprised if we do a Bush album one of these days. I'm sure our friend on YouTube is ready to lambast us for that. He's just waiting with his finger on the send button for the next Boomer Rock album. But yeah, this is a good start, and I feel like when I listened to the Dethroned and Uncrowned version, it was to me as if like those heavier parts in the chorus just never happen. It's just like, here's what the song would be if we kept that same style that the verses were in for the whole song.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I want to piggyback off something you said earlier. I think a lot of these acoustic versions are really provide a nice contrast to the plugged-in versions from the main album, but this is one of the ones that doesn't stand out quite as much because it's maybe more emotional. It's really intense with the strings, but it's one of the covers that I probably like the least. Not because it's not good, it's really good. It's just the heavier song is just so perfect in certain ways that when it's stripped down, it was just a little bit different and almost jarring. But there's other ones that I love, and some I actually love more than the original. So it goes back and forth, but this is not one of those. And as we kind of forge ahead,
the chorus is different because the chorus isn't heavy, but the rest of the song sounds
basically
similar.
The same. I agree with that completely. I definitely agree with that. And as we forge ahead here to the one you are looking for is not here. This we have a special guest on, if you will. It's a Norwegian singer, Silje Wergeland, who you might know from The Gathering. She replaced Anneke in The Gathering, and she does a really nice job on this particular track. Having the accompaniment of those vocals on top of the standard Jonas Rensky vocals, I think are really, really good. I actually got a lot of Anathema on this track because that is what they would do in later years, especially on Weather Systems and some of the albums that would come after that. The verses are just a tad more upbeat. Relatively speaking, of course, nobody's going to confuse this for Dragon Force. But the chorus maybe not be it's not really catchy. It's just hauntingly beautiful, I think, in its own right. And it's a really good song, maybe just a tad below the opener. But what I loved was the acoustic version because it had a completely different feel, at least to me. I thought the dual vocals on that even popped, maybe even a tad more. It may as well have been a different song for me. And I think I liked it even better as an acoustic track.
This is probably going to piss off like diehard Katatonia fans, but I would have loved to hear a whole album with the two singers together. I think that the dichotomy of those two voices fit this style of music so well. I thought the Anathema comparison was totally apt. I thought, again, like this, for the most part, was kind of a mellow song start to finish, so the acoustic version to me wasn't super different, just less of those like heavy rhythm guitars in the background. But I feel like the atmospheric kind of keys and stuff, I think I'm with you. I think I kind of like the Dethroned version a little bit better, honestly. It just has, especially I felt like the guest vocals stood out a little bit more on the acoustic version.
I totally agree. So I think we're in lockstep really on that one. And then they kind of pivot again with track 3, which is Hypnone. This one is a kind of a proggy tune. There's some really interesting drum patterns on this, and the verses are really good. And it reminds me of two different bands, both of which no stranger that I love, and that's Soen combined with Tool, especially with that low end sound. And once I heard the remnants of Soen and Tool, it had my attention. The chorus has layered vocals where you basically have Jonas's vocals just on top of each other, which is really nice. And it's interesting because the chorus almost sounds like it's a plea for help. It was almost like, I don't know, begging the listener for help just because of the nature of the lyrics and the way it sounded. But the bass line is really what sets the tone on this and gets this thing going. It's it's another good track on the front end of the album, but I actually prefer the acoustic version. If I had to pick an acoustic version song of the week on Dethroned, I would have probably picked this song. The verses are amazing. The guitars, the strings, and the piano just sound so good together. The production on this song is top notch. This was an A+ acoustic version, whereas the main tune was probably an A- or an A for me.
Yeah, well put.
Not my song of the week.
Yeah, I think this is where I started to feel like the acoustic versions were starting to kind of take on a little bit more of a life of their own. Which is interesting because this isn't the heaviest song on the album by any means. It's like similar to The Parting, where like the choruses all of a sudden come in with these like heavy rhythm guitars, and then when the verses come in, they go back to being a little bit more subdued, so to speak. And so I feel like this kind of I think they did a little bit better of a job on this with the acoustic version than with The Parting, making it feel a little bit more its own. So I echo your sentiments on this track as well.
First of all, I'm glad we're in lockstep on that. I'm particularly curious about the Racing Heart, because this was a track I kind of struggled with all week. It's kind of a ballad, more so than the other tracks. Talk to me about this track and your thoughts, because I think that it's one of the ones that really stands out, but it's not my favorite track. It's actually one of my least favorite on the album.
I feel like at this point, I'm starting to feel like the album is a little bit samey. The main album, not so much the acoustic version. That I think that will change with the next track, but I'm getting like, I think in my earlier listens of this, I'm kind of like, oh my God, is this going to just be like, 50 minutes of like this back and forth, melancholy meets, heavy rhythm guitar choruses or whatever. And so I think that they kind of, it's also should be mentioned that the first 4 tracks were all written by Jonas, and then this next track, Buildings, was written by Anders Nystrom. So I'm sure there's a reason that there's almost a kind of vibe change from track 4 to track 5. But I'm kind of with you. Like, I feel like of all the songs, this one was kind of like, it wasn't offensive at all. It was just kind of there. Like, I didn't really find anything that stood out too much. And I think that like the first 3 songs for doing a similar job were just, I think, more enjoyable songs personally. But this is another one of those ones where I heard a little bit of Tom England in the choruses a little bit. It's interesting how you, after 40 years of listening to different singers, you just like, you hear things that remind you of what other people. And I just, especially with headphones on, I was kind of like, Tom, are we in the basement at center stage? Like what's going on here?
It's funny because, one of the things that does jump out to me about this track is that Mellotron sound at first. And that combined with other elements were really giving me vibes of Porcupine Tree and what they were doing during the Deadwing era in the 2000s. It kind of picks up a bit with the chorus, not really heavy, but not quite a ballad either, but it's more ballady than some of the other tracks, I guess.
I think it works better acoustic just because I feel like it's meant to be, I think, more of a more somber tune. So I think that it actually, it would be interesting to see if like, I would maybe task you or Patrick to redo this album, same order of tracks, but you have to pick which ones are the acoustic and which ones are the main versions and make an album out of that. And maybe like you don't choose all of the original versions. I feel like that would be interesting for me on the Racing Heart. I would actually choose the acoustic version.
That's very interesting, and I'm going to put Patrick up to the task because he selected the album and he gets to make it his own now. The acoustic version.
I love when we assign homework to the people that make requests.
That'll be the last time he makes a request. No, but I don't actually care much for the acoustic version of this song. I thought it was very samey. But to be fair, I don't think they had much to work with given the original, which I didn't love. So to me, it's just kind of there. It's fine. But Buildings is a really different tune. Really heavy, really melodic, again, kind of upbeat by their standards. And the verses are really kind of a vocal solo in many ways where you really get to hear the vocal shine. But that riff is really heavy and it really makes this a great live tune. I've always thought that this is one of those songs that was great live, and they played it when I saw them in New York City on the tour, because I think they probably had the same sentiment. They also, I think, played it at Prague Power, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it's a song that, yeah, they did. I'm just checking that now. So this is a song that has stayed in the set list, and it makes sense because that riff is really something that lends itself to a live setting. Bassline, same thing, really good live. I love the chorus. I love the vocal lines. And this is a really good follow-up track to a track that I didn't particularly love. This was another Song of the Week candidate for me. And I'll just say that as good as the acoustic version is, I definitely prefer the original. The heaviness on this was something that resonated with me.
I just like that it starts out right away with heavy guitars instead of kind of like lulling you into that, quietness to start. It's just like right off the bat. And so this, this got my attention right away, especially after listening to the previous tracks. This was one of my favorite songs. It was a contender for Song of the Week. I ended up choosing something else, but I like this a lot for all of the reasons that you gave. But I thought in particular, this was, I think, the first track for me where the acoustic version really stood out from the original version, because to me, Buildings is probably the heaviest track on the album up to this point. You're really seeing the dichotomy of an acoustic, pared down version of the song. So while I agree with you, I wouldn't trade the original for the acoustic. I did appreciate how much the acoustic differed from the original more so than the previous track. So I thought they did a nice job here. And Did Katatonia, were they ever one of those loft bands that did like an acoustic show at Prague Power? Because I feel like this would have lended well to that.
They didn't, and it's a complete missed opportunity as far as I'm concerned. At Prague Power on Saturday, they have a special show for the gold badge holders and the sponsors, a real intimate show with one of the bands that performs during the weekend. And I say that because I've seen some of my favorite Prague Power sets up there. Labyrinth acoustic, Van den Plas acoustic. These were just incredible sets.
We mentioned her for the third time today.
Listen, I wasn't there for that, unfortunately, but I kicked myself for missing it. I'm sure phenomenal.
That was incredible. I've
seen her acoustic in other settings, and it blows my mind.
I rarely make it to those shows because it's on the fourth day of Prague Power at noon, and everyone is just like really kind of running on fumes at that point. And so, like, unless it's like an absolutely to be honest, I've missed can't miss sets in that venue just because of pure exhaustion. So it's a nice thing, but like you really have to have the energy for it, or just the desire. I will never forget going to see Seventh Wonder go back to the main venue to record more tracks for their DVD Blu-ray, or I don't think was it a Blu-ray? I think it was just a DVD. And it was at 10 a.m. on Saturday morning, and how I dragged myself to that, and watching the band clearly like exhausted, having to wear the same clothes they wore the night before so that it matched on the DVD, but getting to hear all the stuff that was not on Mercy Falls because they had played all of Mercy Falls the night before was worth it to get to hear some of the other tracks like Alley Cat and whatnot. So, that was one of those, even though that wasn't a loft acoustic set, it was one of those early Saturday sets because they had to get out of there before the headlining band from that night, who that was, I can't even remember, had to come in and do like their sound check probably at like noon. So they needed to get in and get out. And so it was early, 10 a.m., man. That was, oh my God. But
good times. We were young and had energy back then. As we move on to Brian Leach, I just wanted to ask you, because you mentioned this track earlier, and I'm going to ask you straight up, is this your Song of the Week? Because of all the songs on the album, this one really stands out because it is a very different tune.
It's not, but I like it a lot. The beginning of it reminded me immediately of Love, Slow Love, or Slow Love, Slow, whatever the hell it's called, from a Nightwish's Imaginarium, because it had that like sitting on a stool playing like bluesy music, and it kind of makes its way out of that, as most of these songs tend to when the chorus comes on and the guitars come out. But the acoustic version like sticks to like that sound and the really like emotional orchestrations. I thought this was actually one of the highlights of the acoustic album.
Yeah, I completely agree. As much of a jazzy feel as the original has, the jazzy feel of the acoustic version is like that on steroids. This is a really cool track. The verses don't really pick up much. They're very chill, laid back, but the short little guitar solos that are kind of interspersed on the regular version have a very distinct Opeth sound to me. So right off the bat, you've got my attention, but the chorus is awesome. It's not the most dynamic, but it's just beautiful in its simplicity. And then about a minute and 45 seconds into this track, it really does actually pick up and it becomes a lot heavier, a lot more metal. And then the contrast between just the verses and the chorus on this, very, very good. Also not my song of the week, but a very enjoyable tune.
I want to also mention that I find the vocals to be really interesting because I feel like his softer verse vocals are so different from his heavier chorus vocals, and I guess that kind of lends to why I thought I heard three different people singing. We
got to go back to cover Brave Murder Day. You want to hear about interesting vocals? That's a completely third style in and of itself.
Put it in the notebook for future reference. But and I wanted to mention this when we were talking about buildings, so I'll backtrack slightly. But I read on Wikipedia that multiple tracks, including buildings, allude to abandoned city scenes, which were inspired by Renkse's and Nystrom's visiting of abandoned train tunnels and hospitals in abandoned villages in Sweden. The album is not politically themed in the conventional sense of promoting ideologies or presenting solutions, but rather contemplates and laments the poor state of the world due to modern politics in general. So I thought that it was good to know a little bit of that going into it, just to get a little bit of where the songwriter's headspace is when they're creating an album like this, because obviously there's so much of this album that has literally, I'm going to pull this from a quote. Somebody said, quote unquote, emotional sincerity. And I think that's such a great way to describe what this band does, because there's something that feels very earnest about the music. And so I just wanted to throw that out there.
I think that quote is actually the perfect lead-in to Ambitions, which is another one of the more emotional tunes on the album. It's a longer tune. It comes in at over 5 minutes, which is the longest track on an album. And I should note that because these albums, or these tracks really, are about 4 minutes generally in length, they don't overstay their welcome, which is a really good thing. But Ambitions is a longer tune. It's very sad. It's dark. It's brooding. But there's something about it that's really beautiful, and I think it makes the listener kind of stop and think, and it has this introspective quality to it, which I really enjoyed. And the chorus actually has a nice little groove to it, which I don't know that this is a band where I would use the word groove that often, although it is riff-based. But the vocals on this chorus with that nice groove is awesome. And what's really good about this particular tune is that every musician gets a chance to shine at different points of the song. Otherwise, the only complaint, I thought the bridge was a little too long and dry, but the rest of the song was very good. And the acoustic version, also dark, but it has a little bit more promise to it. And when I say promise, I think there's like flashes of something uplifting
Hope?
Here, whereas the song itself is not uplifting
is the word
at all.
You're looking for hope?
Yes, which is something that I don't think you got much of on the actual regular track. And you're going to think I'm crazy, but when I listen to the acoustic version, I actually hear a song that's covered by another band. So let me just say this. If you've ever heard Shape of My Harp, not harp, I'm sure that would be very interesting. Shape of My Heart, the Sting song, but covered by Vandenplas. That's what the acoustic version sounds like. Just a really interesting nod there. And I wonder if there's any shout outs to Sting on this, because it's just a really interesting acoustic version.
Sting and Gavin Rossdale are getting their flowers this week on Metal Exchange. I thought that this track was one of the most radio friendly tracks, at least especially
really?
Towards the beginning. I was getting Alice in Chains kind of vibes, where it was like, you know, Alice in Chains also was great at doing that kind of like quiet to loud dichotomy. And so I feel like this would have been like, I don't know, like of all the songs, I feel like this might have been, it gets a little, I think with the solos, it takes it a little bit out of like the radio airplay, like area. But like the first couple of minutes of the song, I'm like, yeah, I could see this being on the radio. Like there's a little bit of an alt kind of vibe to it, I think. It's a good song. I think that it's kind of, again, similar to a lot of the other songs where it's like, you know, quiet, loud, quiet, loud, quiet, loud, that kind of thing. And I kind of, again, I dug the acoustic version too. It's just more just quiet, 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 quiet instead of, you know, quiet, loud. But good tune. I think there's a lot more good songs to come though.
Interesting, because we're at the back third of the album. We get to Under You. This one starts off with a very similar feel as the prior track, and if you're not listening, it almost feels like the same track. So that's a little bit of a knock, but again, I love the keyboards. There's a little bit of a Castlevania quality to this track in certain spots, which I was either drunk or just not paying attention. But like, to me, that's what I heard, right? And so the verses are straightforward, a little slower than mid-paced. I don't think I would call it mid-paced. I think it's a little slower than that. But some of the vocal lines scream Michael Ackerfeld from Opeth, whereas the chorus screams Porcupine Tree. So you got two of my favorite bands that have obviously collaborated together in the past. So this track, I don't know that anything really stands out per se, other than the solid production and the fact that it's just a good, enjoyable tune. Whereas the acoustic version is really trippy. I still think it maintains that Porcupine Tree vibe, but there's a touch of like Final Fantasy video game soundtrack in there as well because of all the samples in the back end. I think I even prefer the acoustic version on this one, but it's a very good tune. I don't know that I would call it great, but a good tune.
I'll be honest with you. The piano in the background gave me game vibes too. I'll be honest.
Okay, so then we're both onto something.
Yeah, I don't know if I had like a particular game in mind, but like definitely would have fit some sort of ambient part of a video game in some sense. So I'm kind of with you on that one. I feel like this one, it definitely has almost like an even more melancholy kind of tone to the vocals, especially in the verses when the song gets started. But I feel like this is a good example of a one of the acoustic songs having kind of its own vibe to it, I think, because with the acoustic guitars replacing the electric guitars but leaving in those piano parts, I think I actually prefer the acoustic version on this one.
Yeah, so I think we're both. I think we have similar feelings about that. One of the tracks I think that I was most curious to revisit the acoustic version of was Lydian, the next track, and that's because this is a heavier song. I'm happy to get into this one first, but I'll kick it over to you. What are your thoughts on this track that really starts off heavy but rather melodic?
Yeah, this was going to be my song of the week for that very reason. It starts off like, it sounds like an Amorphous song right off the bat, at least in my opinion, because it just, one of the things I feel like this album doesn't have a ton of is like heavy melodic passages, like, especially because I feel like the singing has almost this way of like going against the music, or like where it stops earlier than you think it will, or it lasts longer than you think it will. It's like an unconventional style that I think keeps you guessing, but it also doesn't lend itself to kind of like a melodic kind of vibe. And so, you know, as usual, like I tend to gravitate towards things that have more of a melodic vibe. I think that the chorus has a little bit more of a melodic vibe in this song. So it's the one that as I returned back to it, I was just kind of like, as soon as it kicked in, I was like, hell yeah, like it got me excited to hear it. Cause I don't know if it's because it reminded me of Amorphous, like the beginning of an Amorphous song, but it holds up its end of the bargain from start to finish. And I think the acoustic version is a cool version of it, because I think it's a song that maintains more of a heaviness throughout. So the acoustic version, I think, feels more different because of that. So why don't we give the original version a listen, and we will come back and get your thoughts on Lethean.
Now, October, this time you won't be needing me. Run along the freeway, swaying when the spark against the oncoming dark left me with the pills. We had plans, but you couldn't make it through the trees. What took you so long? The high grass. What took you so long? Translate.
I am really glad you chose this for your song of the week. And if you would have asked me midweek, what's my song of the week, I would have gone with this as well. So I was right there with you until the bitter end. Heavy start, as I mentioned. I love the sound of the drums. I think the drums on this track really stand out. The verses scream Soen, and that is not a bad thing at all. I happen to think the verses are really great on this track, and I can see why it's a kind of tune that they play live every time I've seen them, and it's something that they, I think, now even have in their encore. So this is something that I think the crowd really gets into. It's just heavy enough, a great guitar solo, which again, I point out because it's not something that resonates on every single track, but I find myself more than any other track really tapping my foot to the beat and kind of slowly banging my head to this one. And I had mentioned at the outset, I was curious about the acoustic version of this because this is one of the heavier tunes, and it's very symphonic, kind of a mixed bag. I don't really love the beginning of the acoustic track, but it gets better as the song goes on. But the Dead End Kings version of Lethean is top notch, and I'm glad you chose it.
Thank you. I'm glad I chose it too. But that said, I really like the next track too. I think First Prayer starts out great as well. Again, just like it starts out heavy right from the bat. This was one of the tracks that I think most reminded me of like if Bush like slowed it down and got like a little sadder. Like this was, I just for some reason could hear a little bit of Gavin Rossdale in the vocals, but on this track in particular, especially at the beginning, I have to believe this is one of your Song of the Week finalists, if not your Song of the Week.
Ironically enough, it wasn't, and I'll tell you why. Although the song leans heavier in spots, it wasn't the vocals that reminded me of like 90s alt rock. It was actually the guitar work. So you put my guitar work and your vocals, and I guess we're onto something. This song is good, but I wouldn't say that it's a great song. I thought it was a little bit bland. The chorus just isn't as catchy as some of the stuff that came before it. But the acoustic version is phenomenal. Great samples, and the guitar tone of that acoustic guitar reminds me so much of Dawn of Solace, which was my album of the year a couple of years ago. They put out another great release this year. If I was going to pick a song of the week from the acoustic album, it was probably going to be this one. I think that part of the problem that First Prayer had was that it wasn't Dead Letters, the next track, really the final track on the album. And I guess I'll just give it away because we're at the end. By the last listener to, Dead Letters became my song of the week. For multiple reasons. So let's give the final track a listen, and then I'll come back and kind of give my rationale for it, and we'll put a bow on this.
Could I see clear? Fixation, internal void. My dreams are getting darker and darker. This life before me, its blood runs so
Dead Letters is a song they still have in their live set list, and I'm all for it. The beginning guitar riff and the drums may as well be a Tool song when this thing starts, albeit with keys behind it, which is a really kind of a nice touch. But the way that this song just ends the album is absolutely just kick-ass, in my opinion. It has an epic feel. It has a different feel, but it still retains that core Katatonia sound. And I love the softer Porcupine Tree-inspired bridge. I love the keyboard solo. More of this. I don't even know that I realized how good this song was until this week, but I'm all there. I'm all there for it. And I didn't think the acoustic version was going to be very good, just how much I love the Dead End Kings version. But even that was better than I expected. Just a great way to go out. And there are bonus tracks on this album. I'm happy to get into them. But Dead Letters for me is kind of the high watermark, and just what a way to end this beautiful album.
I would have liked to have heard more keys, like in this song, like more of the electronic keys than like the piano style. So this was one of my favorite songs as well. One of my finalists for Song of the Week, along with Buildings. I think the songs that just tend to lean heavier worked more for me. But very good choice. Glad we didn't choose the same song in this exercise. Thought the acoustic version was really a nice counterpoint to the original. Really somber. A song that has like some really heavy parts in the main version. The acoustic version is super, super somber, and a really somber way to end the acoustic version of the album. I listened to the Art of Darkening. I did not have the other bonus track second. And I thought this was kind of a nice kind of extra track. It's actually a really good tune that I think would not have been out of place if it made onto the album proper.
I thought it sounded like a Simon and Garfunkel type of song to me, like just had a different vibe. And some of the percussion has either like a tribal or a reggae quality to it. So it is different. And I do think it is an interesting choice for a bonus track. And it definitely has a ballad, almost like an alt-rock feel. There's a lot going on this track. So I think it is a good bonus track. I think it would have been a little jarring if you made it the seventh track on the album.
Right.
But I too have never even heard a second, so I'm going to check that out when we're done. But I thought the Act of Darkening was an interesting choice for a bonus track, but it just, after Dead Letters, it didn't matter what they put on. I thought it was going to pale in comparison.
Yeah, I got like a Porcupine Tree goes like tribal kind of vibe.
All right. So I think we're in the same vein. Unless you've got any other thoughts, I'm really curious to hear what you're going to score this thing, because I know it's not exactly something that you'd look for when you're listening to your flower power metal, but at the same time, just based on most of what you said, I think you really liked it.
I will quote AllMusic, and they said in their review, with its various parts, ever-shifting dynamics, and blazing instrumental interludes, it sends the set off with a nearly majestic bang. Dead End Kings is uncompromising in its musical excellence, bleak vision, and dark, hunted beauty. I don't know if that meant to be haunted, but it says hunted, whatever. It extends Katatonia's reach exponentially. And yeah, so I that said, this isn't something that I typically like reach for when especially if I'm looking for something to kind of lift me up. But it is in no way difficult to listen to. All the songs were good to great. It's not my favorite type of music in the world, but there's nothing about it that's offensive in any way, and it's in the right context a really enjoyable listen. So I gave this a 7.0. It was really just kind of enjoyable, and it may have benefited from following an early Creator album that was really harsh and really tough to listen to the week prior.
It got the Pleasure to Kill rub, so I guess
right. And shameless plug in the middle of scoring an album, but we did a bonus episode for our Patreon listeners about the Deer Hunter and their color spectrum album, and I can assure you we only did the first 4 tracks from it, not the entire thing, which because it's quite a long thing, and so that was made for kind of like an interesting middle discussion in between Creator and Katatonia. We've definitely kind of moved all over the map of genres, and we're going to continue down that road next week for sure. But I thought that, like, as far as stuff that isn't my cup of tea, so to speak, it's pretty much as high as I would give a rating to a genre that I'm not like absolutely in love with. But it's hard to really give it anything less than a 7 for me.
As I mentioned earlier, I was really kind of concerned about this album, not because I don't like it, but I also know that if I'm not in the right mood for it, it's not going to resonate with me, just because it's not the kind of thing that you would just say, oh, this is a go-to album. Like, I can listen to Operation Mindcrime when I'm in a good mood, bad mood. It doesn't matter. I can put that on. This, I think I got to be in the right mood to really enjoy it. And thankfully this week, I was definitely in that mood. So, Patrick, you didn't know you were doing this, but you kind of hit the nail on the head with your timing here. The reason I can't give this album a 9 is because it's not an album that I can just put on anytime and enjoy it. So it suffers from that. But I'll say this, when you're in the right mood for it, it's a 9. Like, it's that good. But there are times where I'm just never going to reach for this. So it really is dependent on my mood. So I'm going to give it a 7.75. I think it's something that, if I'm not in the right mood, it's not going to land, and it's probably somewhere in the 6s. But when I'm in the right mood, I adore it. And so I'll split the baby and give it a 7.75. I'm a fan of this band. I strongly encourage you to see them live if you didn't get to see them at Prague Power. That they are a true headliner in every sense of the word.
Welcome back to the King Solomon Exchange. So 7.375 is our collective score here. So hopefully we did this album justice. I know our friend Justin's also a big Katatonia fan, so we'll see what his thoughts are too from our episode. But yeah, this was just a lot. This was a lot easier to digest for me than last week's selection, which I know you will continue to remind me was my own doing when I chose the last door. So,
well, we're going to go back to Creator, my friend. We are going to go back, but we'll do something a little more recent that I know you're going to enjoy more, like full stop. I want to talk about some news items and obviously hear your choice for next week. But before we do, just a thank you and a shout out to our Patreon members. Again, you help support the show, and we appreciate you. If you are new to the podcast, please give us a like, a follow, and consider joining the Patreon. We appreciate you. Some news items. Lord of the Lost has announced a North American tour early 2026. They are heading out January 19th, starting in Baltimore, Maryland, ending up on the West Coast out in San Francisco on February 8th. A great live band who I had the pleasure of seeing on 70,000 Tons of Metal just a couple of years ago. I am itching to see them again, so I'm going to try to catch the New York City date when they come here on January 23rd of next year. But I was very happy to hear that not only they are back to North America, but seemingly doing well, playing some bigger venues this time around. So good for them. Another band we have not yet talked about on the podcast, but we are I think long overdue in many ways, and that is Saxon. They are coming out with a new live album next month. It's called Eagles Over Hellfest, from their shows in 2024 when they played over at that big festival in Europe. A big Saxon fan. I wouldn't say I know any of their albums that well, but when it comes to the greatest hits, they are really, really good, and they still are a fantastic live band. So kudos to them. I look forward to that release. And lastly, I don't know if you're even aware of this, but I saw something online that just caught my eye. It was so interesting. Kiko Loureiro and Marty Friedman are going out on tour together. And when you look at the set list, Kiko is doing a lot of his solo stuff, but they do an Angra medley with Carry On, Spread Your Fire, Nova Era, Morning Star, Evil Warning, and Speed. They do Megadeth songs together. They do Nothing to Say. They do Angels and Demons.
Oh my God, I'm looking at the set list now. This is sick.
And then they do the final song is Rebirth, and it is so cool to me watching Marty Friedman play on all these classic Angra tunes. I thought this was the coolest thing, and there's videos out there. If you are a fan of Megadeth or you're a fan of Angra, go check this out. This is really interesting stuff, and I just never even envisioned something like this happening, and Marty Friedman is like getting into it on songs like Rebirth. It's really awesome.
I have to send this to Mike. I feel like he's going to lose his shit when he sees this.
Yeah, and the set list is awesome. So I just wanted to kind of end on that note. I thought it was really cool, something to check out. Maybe I'll make it the Sunday Select, if you will, just because I thought people should see this. But that brings us to next week. What am I listening to?
Well, would be remiss if I didn't have a long-winded story as to why this is happening. So here we go. Going back a couple of weeks, 1 week to our Creator episode, it was interesting. We have a chat group that we have with our top Patreon patrons. We have a Facebook chat and also a monthly Zoom chat that we do. And one of the things that came up was, I believe it was Charles who had said, you guys should think about doing 2 albums by the same band in a row when it's such a difference. And like doing an album like Pleasure to Kill from Creator and then following it up with like their most recent album would be such a different, vibe. It's such a different sound. And I was thinking about all the bands that like you could talk about 2 albums and you may as well be talking about 2 different bands. And it kind of came to mind, and also through a lot of discussion, in our group, that what a band that I think first of all, we haven't done an album by this band in 2 years. And second of all, the 2 albums I'm thinking of are both celebrating anniversaries right around this time. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take the next 2 weeks and choose 2 albums from this band, and then I'm going to let you choose the 2 episodes after. They don't have to be from the same band, but I'm just basically stealing your spot and giving you mine for June. And what we're going to do going forwards is we're going to leave this open for us to, if one of us has 2 episodes or more in the same month, which I don't think that would ever be more than 2, we'll do some rearranging if one of us wants to do 2 albums from the same band in a row. So we're going to start off next week with doing this with Iron Maiden. And the 2 albums I chose both have pretty major anniversaries right around this time. The debut album, Iron Maiden, the self-titled album, was released on April 11, 1980. So that just recently celebrated its 45th anniversary, which is horrible. That was before we were born. We have covered Killers, which was the other Paul Di'Anno Iron Maiden album, so I wanted to go back and go talk about this album. The album that I want to talk about in comparison to this is Brave New World, which came out on May 29th, 2000, 2 days prior to us recording this episode, would be its 25th anniversary. This was the band's kind of reunion album after after Adrian Smith and Bruce Dickinson had rejoined the band after leaving. I remember this was, I think, the first non-best of Iron Maiden album I ever bought. I still have the CD. I remember sneaking The Wicker Man into party playlists when I was in college. Like, we'd be in the basement playing beer pong, and then The Wicker Man would come on, and it would just, like, I don't think anybody ever really noticed, but it made me happy. Knops was a fan of that song as well, I recall. So we're going to talk about those 2 albums. I'm sure we could have picked a newer Iron Maiden album, and that would have been even more different, but I feel like because of the anniversaries of these 2, I think it fits well. And it also helps kind of fill in the Iron Maiden discography, which we've kind of been, I feel like, dragging our feet a little bit on. We discussed, I think, Seventh Son was the last album we discussed, and that was just about 2 years ago. So I thought this would be a good way to sneak 2 albums in, and I think that they're definitely different enough that there'll be some good comparison points to make. So that's the plan.
This is excellent. I am smiling ear to ear. And I'll tell you another thing. They just started their new tour. And I don't know if you've had a chance to check the set list out, but they are touching a lot of these early albums. Some people are saying it's still too much of a greatest hits. Other people are, obviously very excited to see songs like, Phantom of the Opera and stuff like that. And so like, I am all for this. This is really great. These are two very different sounding albums, and the fact that they are on the heels of major anniversaries, the timing couldn't be more perfect. And I'll just give you a hint. The album that I have scheduled for the following week, so now we're going ahead 3 weeks, is another anniversary album, but by a completely different band in a completely different genre. But something that I've had kind of penciled in for a couple of years now, because I've held off on the band because I wanted to talk about that album this month. So
I was nervous that you had Brave New World in mind and that I was stealing your thunder. So I'm glad that that's not the case.
No. I thought you were going to pick Sonata Arctica, I'll be completely honest, because their new stuff is just so different than some of the older stuff. So I thought you were going to pick Sonata Arctica, but I'm much happier that you picked these two albums. I'm really looking forward to this.
Well, you know what? Like, just to peek behind the curtain, there's been a lot of chatter in our group about Iron Maiden and, the set lists and the older stuff and the newer stuff. And so I feel like that kind of helped solidify the choice too.
Great choice. Timely. I think it'll make for great discussion. And, kind of going back to our Killers episode, I'm not the biggest self-professed Di'Anno fan, but I also happen to really like the music that they were doing on those first two albums. So it's kind of interesting. When you hear Bruce sing songs like Wrathchild, I mean, it's fantastic. Like there's a lot to like about these albums. And, from that debut, there's some of their biggest songs: Iron Maiden, Phantom of the Opera, Running Free, which is a great live song, and I'll talk more about that in long form next week. But great choice. I'm looking forward to this immensely. And
I'll tell you, when we did Killers, now this was over 4 years ago. This was our 18th episode. At the time, I was more familiar with songs from the self-titled than I was from Killers. I didn't know Killers that well, but those three songs that you mentioned in particular, I knew quite well from the debut. So it's interesting. Like when you chose it, I was like, oh, this is good, because I really don't know this album very well. And I ended up liking it so much more than I thought I would. I gave it an 8 out of 10. So I'm looking forward to talking about these albums. Brave New World is an album I have not listened to in so long. I'd be surprised if I even remember a lot of it, so I'm excited to go back to it.
When I look forward to modern Maiden, when I want to hear something that's not the classic material, I go back to Brave New World time and time again. So I've listened to it quite a bit, but I'll share more thoughts next week. I may be in the minority on my opinion on Brave New World, but I'll get into that and a lot more next week. So great choices. Thanks to everyone else for hanging out with us today. We appreciate it and look forward to coming back with an Iron Maiden twofer over the next 2 weeks.
I'm excited to see what you choose when you decide to do two albums by the same band. I'm really curious where you go with that. But shout out to Charles and our Patreon crew for that idea. I think it really makes a lot of sense in especially situations like this where bands have been around for so long that their sound has really matured or graduated, or whatever the word is that I'm thinking of. I can't. Evolved. Thank you. Charles Darwin.
So Sesame Street taught you how to read, but it didn't teach you vocabulary or anything else. Is that what you're saying?
No, I learned that from Family Guy, which is part of the problem.
Enjoy the week, my friend. I look forward to chatting soon.
Take care, buddy.